Today's headline is said he was scared to death. The subheadline says Engineer McCarthy's joke in railroad building days in Oregon. It says, one of the most popular and best known locomotive engineers on the Southern Pacific Railroad on its branch from San Francisco to Portland, Oregon, is Dan McCarthy, who has a daylight run for the famous Rogue River Valley in the southern part of Oregon. He has been with the railroad ever since it was built, and in fact helped to build it for all that country where the Modocs used to roam in full mastery. McCarthy came from the east, but now nothing would induce him to return to his old home except for a brief visit. He owns one of the finest fruit orchards in all that country, probably the best valley in the world for fruit growing. He also owns a gold mine to himself, which has just been opened in a cut of the railroad for which he runs every day, and this world's affairs look somewhat rosy for him. McCarthy has many interesting stories of his early experiences in railroading in Oregon, and the one that amuses him most occurred at the place called Phoenix in the Rogue River Valley, not far from the prosperous town of Ashland where he lives. When the road had got as far as Phoenix about 10 years ago, there gathered one Sunday from miles around no less than 1,500 persons. Many of them had never seen a locomotive. They came on horseback and in all sorts of conveyances, and it seemed as if there could not be that many persons in all southern Oregon. The curiosity and excitement over the new railroad was tremendous. Inasmuch as the company had a large force at work building the road, and as the work there was easy, it was necessary for the citizens to move quickly if they would see the road go through and be on hand to see the first locomotive that came up. The spectators tied their horses to the trees that had been felled, and there was great confusion in the throng. As fast as the rails were laid, McCarthy kept moving up his engine while the people gathered around to watch his machine and its wonderful workings. They interfered with the track layers to some extent, but that was unavoidable. Finally, one old man came up close to the engine and asked if he could not climb up into it as a mark of special distinction. McCarthy gave his permission, and soon the old man was sitting in the cab. He was in raptures and could not hold himself in. He exclaimed in the hearing of nearly all those who were present, "Thank God I have lived to see this day. I never thought it would come that I should see a locomotive again. I'm an old 49er and have not seen a locomotive since I left the East so many years ago. Now I'm riding on a locomotive. Thank God, thank God." The old man went on in this way for a long time and had worked up the crowd to a great deal of enthusiasm. They cheered him and they cheered the locomotive with great zest. The crowd was interested with the work, and McCarthy thought he would have a little joke and also see if he could not clear the tracks to some extent. He tipped a wink to his fireman to blow off steam in the liveliest fashion. The old man was beginning his 14th oration to the spectators when, with the noise of a tornado and a terrific shh, the engine began to snort and roar. Panic seized the entire throng. The horses ran away by the dozen, men fell out of trees, hid themselves behind boulders, ran hatless for hundreds of yards, crashed through debris, plunged through streams, and panting and frightened disappeared in the underbrush across the valley. It was every man for himself, and horses and wagons might go to perdition. The last day had come for scores of them. Some dropped in the attitude of prayer, and others fell on their faces in the hope of escaping some of the missiles that they were sure would soon begin to fly. The old man, who had thanked God that he had lived to see that day, simply fell out of the cab window and lay beside the engine, unable to get up, and waiting for the end which he hoped would be without prolonged agony. No such stampede was ever seen in that country, and the memory of it lingers vividly with those present to this day. At last, the extra steam became exhausted, and by degrees the crowd began to return. They came cautiously at first and kept a respectful distance. The old man was so bruised that he could not get away very far. He soon plucked up his courage to approach McCarthy and to say, standing on the ground this time, "Neighbor, I'm an old 49er, and I've seen many hardships and have had all sorts of close calls. I fought all through the Modoc War, and I know what danger is from Indians and wild animals. I tell you I have been in some pretty tight fixes, but I want to say I was never scared to death before." This story came from the great state of New York. Being reported in the Sun of October 28, 1894. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to continue to uncover all of America's lost and forgotten history, then remember before you leave to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and remember to like and comment below. And we will see you next time on Americana Archives.